The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Met Radio, Met Media, or Metropolitan State University of Denver. This podcast may include discussions of sensitive or potentially triggering topics. This podcast may contain discussions of mature or sensitive topics that may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. All right, hi everybody. Welcome back to Poli-Pop Talk. I'm here with a special guest today, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hey, thanks for having me today. Appreciate it. My name's John Padora, and I am a former congressional candidate in Colorado's 4th Congressional District. That is the seat that Lauren Boebert currently holds. I didn't make it through the primary, unfortunately, and I am very much so looking forward to using my voice and leveraging activism to make a difference in my community and my country.
And when you say you didn't make it to primary, what do you mean by that?
So in Colorado, you can either get on the ballot through the caucus and assembly process, or you can petition onto the ballot. I decided early on that I was going to go exclusively through the caucus and assembly process, and we weren't able to hit the 30% threshold. We were up against an incredibly well-funded primary candidate who was just able to dominate all the competition and make sure that this was an uncontested primary. So standing up to the big money didn't work out too well for me this time.
So you said that you can petition or you can do the assembly process, and you decided to do the assembly process. Was that because to you felt like you kind of had strong support within the Democratic Party?
So it's a combination of both. You need 1,500 signatures to get onto the ballot. That sounds easy, but you need roughly 3,000 because the SOS will actually strike and invalidate a lot of those signatures down. It is a grueling and time-consuming process to do that in the 2 months that you have. You have from January 1st-ish, I think, until March 18th to gather all those signatures. I've started to do it in the past before, and I made it to about 600 signatures. There's companies that you can hire. They charge $25 to $35 per signature. So do the math on that. This can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in Colorado to petition onto the ballot. I liked the caucus and assembly process because, I knew that I had supporters. I knew that I had people that would come out and support me. And I really wanted to use it as a metric for grassroots support within the community. But like I said, when you go against an opponent that can spend $1 or $2 million and pack and fill the caucuses, we just couldn't keep up with it this year.
So I'm glad you brought up your opponent packing and filling the caucuses, because at my county's caucus, I definitely seen and heard people just rooting for her and kind of persuading everybody around them to vote for her. So when it came to like the delegates, it was very much between yourself and that other person that we're speaking about, that people were discussing. And she had just like the most persuasive people telling all her great talking points, talking her up. And I was like, I've never even seen this woman. What are we talking about? And when I kind of got deeper into it, when I went to state assembly, they had mentioned her. And I said, well, she switched parties. I don't know if you're aware of that. And she's a veteran. That's about all I got of information from her. And when we had this nonprofit organization that was trying to get the forum organized, she went to a like town hall like on Zoom, and then she talks to her personally, the leader of this nonprofit. And what it was basically the same exact thing, just being reiterated. So she's very well trained on her talking points and has whoever she has vouching for her also well trained on her talking points. And when you say the funding, I looked into her funding, and there was millions of dollars behind that campaign.
She is the top non-incumbent congressional fundraising candidate in the entire country this year. So just to give you a reality check on how big the money is that's been flowing into her. I think it dissuaded a lot of people, but I think it's really, really powerful when you're trying to recruit people to come out and delegate for you, when you're able to spend $1 million to run ads, to recruit people that are independents, Republicans, all kinds of people to come out and support you, veterans. People see the money, and they always want to be on the winning side, right? So people see the money. They see this big professional campaign that's being managed by Washington, D.C., and people see power because they want to beat Lauren Boebert. And the point that I tried to drill home during the assembly is like, money isn't going to beat Lauren Boebert in Colorado's most conservative district. Building a working class movement is something that inspires the young people, something that brings back the disaffected voters. The Democrats are the minority, right, in Colorado 4. The unaffiliated voters make up nearly 52% of the composition. The unaffiliated, the disaffected voters, the anti-establishment people, those are the folks that you have to bring back. So I'm worried about what the success is going to look like heading into November.
I also am worried about what that's going to look like. I am not quite sure. So, unfortunately, in our politics, there's a lot of money, right? I believe what you had mentioned once was you signed a contract that saying you didn't take any APAC money. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, so I took the no APAC money pledge, and that's why I was endorsed by Citizens Against APAC Corruption. That is something really important to me. You know, watching the U.S. complicity to fund genocide the last couple of years, watching what's happening in Iran right now, I am very concerned about the power and the strength of the military-industrial complex, the people that really control our government at the fundamental base level, regardless of which party holds a majority or a minority, regardless of whoever's in the White House. There's always money for war. There's always money for genocide. There's always money to drop bombs at a time where we're $39 trillion in the hole and people don't have housing. People don't have health care. So I got into politics. One of my driving forces was my opposition to the Iraq and Afghanistan conflict when I was in college. And I've carried that with me throughout my political career. So I knew pretty early on that it's a difficult path to take because there is a lot of pro-Israeli donors in the Democratic Party that you can raise millions of dollars from. And I know that you need money to compete, but I would rather lose and maintain my dignity than take part and operate under that blood money.
So, you took that pledge. Do you know if this person took the pledge?
I was the only candidate in this race from either party that took that pledge.
Interesting and unfortunate. So I hear a lot of people, so you said there's always money for wars. I tend to say that all the time because we all of a sudden can't find healthcare, we're getting SNAP benefits cut and all these different things that keep happening, but there's always money for war. So speaking of war, with the conflict going on in Iran, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, this is something that I feel compelled to say that regardless of who was in the White House, I think it was going to happen. I think that for too long, Israel has commandeered control of our government, you know, and I say that without being anti-Semitic in any sense whatsoever. It's just if you follow the money and see the vast amount of influence they hold over the American government, it's scary. So I think that Trump's close proximity and relationship to Netanyahu is exactly why we're carrying out this war. This war was not in the interests of the American people. Iran didn't pose a direct and immediate threat to us. They were willing to negotiate. They were willing to let us audit and oversee their nuclear developments. We have to stop being this imperial force in the world. For too long, I think we've operated under this like colonialist mindset that when there's resources, we take them because we can overwhelm them. We're not going to war with Russia. We're not going to war with China. We're going to war with Iraq, with Afghanistan, with Venezuela, with, you know, these countries that we know that they can't compete with our military might. And I think that Israel has a conqueror mindset where they want to expand their footprint in the Middle East. And Iran is really the last thing standing in their way. So I think this has absolutely nothing to do with the safety of the American people, the safety of the Israeli people. And I think it has everything to do with continuing to prop up a failing empire that's $39 trillion in debt, that's about to collapse. And empires, if you watch throughout history, they don't go out quietly. They act really erratically. They act insane. They do things that are against their interests. They bankrupt the country even further. And I think that this is a huge distraction when you saw the Epstein files. I think when you see a failing domestic economy, when you see the right-wing coalition fracturing into pieces, I think that they know that they needed a war, you know, heading into the midterms. So that's really what I think this is about.
I posted this clip the other day that Donald Trump and President Zelensky were sitting down together, and Zelensky is asked if he was willing to hold elections in his country while the war is going on. And he says, we just need to make sure it's secure and kind of have a truce among the seas and the land and all these things to make sure that that is a possibility. And Trump got super excited that he said that you can't have elections during a war. So with that being said, I really think that he couldn't make it more obvious as to why he's doing these things during an election year.
You know, the one thing Trump is very open about is who he is. Pay attention to what he says, what he does, because that's what he's going to do. He's not very elusive. He's openly embracing fascism. He is looking at what's happening in Ukraine and seeing how they haven't had elections the last couple of years. And he sees the writing on the wall. He knows that the Democrats are going to take the majority in the House. He knows that there's a high likelihood that they're going to take back the Senate. If they take back the Senate, guess what? They can impeach him, they can convict him, they can remove him, or at the very least, they can steamroll and prevent his entire agenda over the next 2 years and stop him dead in his tracks. So I think he knows that this is a critical inflection point for himself, that he doesn't need to get reelected, that he can do whatever the hell he wants. And I think that he's following the fascist playbook. And I think we should all really, really be fearful. Just yesterday, he signed an executive order that attacks mail-in votes throughout the country that we know is going to be deemed unconstitutional, but we're not really adhering to the Constitution right now anyway. I'm not crystal clear that the Supreme Court is going to operate as a check and balance when they need to. So I think that he's not putting all of his eggs in one basket. He's starting an illegal, unilateral, unjust war so that he can nullify the elections. I think he's going to deploy ICE to a lot of our blue states and polling places. And then I think he's going to attack mail-in votes because it's voter suppression. So he's really taking a holistic approach to try to overturn our democracy, and we shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, when we see right now what Congress is trying to pass is the SAVE Act, and they're just really pushing for it, which will disenfranchise like millions of women that have gotten married and changed their name. It'll disenfranchise anybody who can't afford any form of government ID. And then you hear people saying like, kind of, how is this happening? Like, where, like, as far as the war action as well, because Congress is the one that has the power to declare war, and he just kind of is overstepping. So the fact that you were running for a congressional, like, district, do you think you did that because that's where you kind of see lack of effort and, like, lack of action being taken?
I think that traditionally Congress has a constitutional duty to allow war, to appropriate funding. The reason that I ran for Congress is because if you follow the money, if you follow the corruption, it all ends up back at the same place, and that's in the hands of the lobbyists and the powerful few in Washington, D.C. I've always been very passionate about making a change within my community, making change at the state level. But if we're honest with ourselves right now, there's nowhere that needs a generational change of power than Washington, D.C. And so I am very passionate about foreign policy. I'm very passionate about climate action and reform. And I know that the way to get that done is at the federal level. That's where I want to be because that's where I know I can make the biggest impact. I think that we're seeing just evidence of how self-corrupting Washington, D.C. is. We're seeing that we have the oldest, most ineffective Congress in American history. So I think me being 37 years old, I look at it as a necessity to get working class, younger voices into Washington that have lived experience, right? That can really go there and make a difference. So I'm still really passionate about making an impact there where we need it the most.
So, what are your plans to kind of help your community? I know you probably built a following with your campaign. Are you still kind of seeing that support lingering and people still watching you and kind of seeing what you have to say because they gain that respect for you?
So one of the honestly most inspiring things about this is, I suspended my campaign about a week ago, a little over a week ago when there was just no path to ballot access, no path to victory. After we didn't make ballot access through the caucus and assembly, we would have had 4 days to go out there and get roughly 3,000 signatures. And we had about 100 people that were ready to do it. That was inspiring to me, but I also couldn't ask any more of them, ask any more of their time, their energy, their resources when I knew that we were, staring down the barrel of a gun. But what really inspired me was when I suspended my campaign, I spent the next 48 hours on the phone. Hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, emails, people from all over the country, people that I talked to in the media, people that worked on my campaign that volunteered, people in Loveland, people in Highlands Ranch, in Sterling, in Fort Morgan, and all these communities that I visited, telling me about the impact that my campaign made with them, asking me the same question over and over again. What's next, John? What's next? I'm 37 years old. I'm raising 3 kids. I've sacrificed a lot. This is the second time I've ran for this seat, so I've perpetually been doing this since about 2023, longer than anybody else in the race. I traveled 15,000 miles this last year in my personal vehicle. I work 50 hours a week. I'm in it. My heart's in it, but I don't know what's next. And I am continuing to talk to those people because I know that the movement that we built was real, the energy that we have around us is real, and that it would be silly to let that all go to waste. So, however, I can best convert that, whether it's through activism or being more locally involved to try to, trickle that change up to the federal level, supporting candidates that really align with my values throughout this entire state and country. Whatever comes next, I'm going to keep fighting.
That's awesome. And I'm glad to hear it that you're not just kind of just going to disappear. And I did ask about you running for Congress. You said because that's where you felt you can make the most impact. So if we're talking about that, what I've seen a lot of the times is people start small and kind of build their way up. Are you willing to maybe do that with like a city council seat or like maybe a House district or something state level first to maybe like help you?
For sure. I have mixed feelings on it, and I'll just kind of start from the bottom up. Too much of what we have in Washington, D.C. is people who've spent 4 to 8 years on the city council, 4 to 8 years in a state legislative seat, 4 to 8 years somewhere else, and then finally landed in Congress. Take Colorado's first congressional district, Diane DeGette, who served in the Colorado State Legislature for 8 years. She served for over 3 decades in Washington, D.C. Part of me running for Congress was seeing this need and desire to disrupt that kind of candidate pipeline, right? Let's get working class people. Let's get teachers. Let's get union workers. Let's get machinists, engineers, all kinds of working class people to Washington, D.C. to solve the problems. That doesn't mean that I won't consider it. That doesn't mean if there's an opportunity that I have at the local level to make a difference that I would absolutely contribute to it. I'm very passionate about seeing us flip a commissioner seat in Weld County. Whether that's me or I support somebody else, I would be very open to serving in the state legislature here. The difficulty with that is it pays $43,000 a year, and it's a part-time job, but it's a full-time job. All the people that I've made friends with that are serving, they sacrifice a lot of time and hours and money or energy and resources. So that I understand that citizen legislature type mindset in Colorado, but it makes it really difficult for people like me, younger people that are working class and raising families and can't afford to live off $43,000 a year and would probably have to quit my full-time job and stop my consulting business that I do on the side in order to do that. So there's real barriers that I face, but I am open to contributing at the local, the state, the county level.
And so you had mentioned that you were an activist. What kind of made you claim that title? I know you were talking about in college you got into it with the Iraq war. So tell me more about that. Like how as a young person did you kind of know that this was something you should pay attention to? Because as a young person now, I can't get anybody to really seem to care at a level like that or to dedicate their time and energy. Like I see a lot more division within like the Democratic Party because then you have the independents and then other people. And I guess I don't understand how I feel like before young people really used to care and they used to be like the backbone of like these movements. And now I can't like get that motivation again.
So to address the second part of your question, I think there's a lot of apathy with younger people that are up and coming. I think that they've watched a trifecta of power, where Democrats held the majority of the Senate seats, the congressional seats, and Joe Biden in 2020, and they saw that their lives did not materially improve to the level that they should have. I think there's a lot of apathy from unaffiliated voters. I think there's a lot of apathy from people that have witnessed the hyperpartisanship, the big money influence that controls both major political parties here. So I think there's a lot of apathy by design because when you make a system that's inequitable, when you make a system that doesn't deliver, when you create and cultivate a system that requires a lot of time and sacrifice to make structural change, then apathy breeds and it brews. So I agree with your point that maybe there's a little level of disconnect going on. What really did it for me was I was in college. I started to get politically involved. I started taking political science courses. I found it really passionate. And then I met a group of Afghanistan war vets, and they were pretty young people, in their 20s and their 30s. And I saw the PTSD on them. I heard their horror stories. Uh, and I just thought, like, I was confused for all those years thinking America was doing good things fighting terrorism in the Middle East when, in fact, I found out we were cultivating terrorism. We were the terrorizers. We were the occupiers. We were the foreign army that they stood up to. We invaded Iraq under false pretense for weapons of mass destruction that never existed. We occupied Afghanistan for 20 years, and we created and cultivated an entirely new generation of terrorists that grew up under United States occupation. I put myself in those shoes. I talked to the soldiers. That was something that I was really passionate about. But that was just my first exposure to politics. What really did it to me was surviving an opioid addiction. When I was 19, I got in a really bad car accident. My head went through the windshield. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Woke up in an incredible amount of chronic pain. And a 19-year-old boy that didn't know what he was doing went to the doctors, went to pain management, got prescribed Percocets and oxycodones, and watched my life spiral out of control. Long story short, I struggled with addiction and sobriety for years until it finally landed me for a little over 2 months in county prison. The horrors, the atrocities that I witnessed in there, the people with mental health conditions, the lack of correction, the reality that they couldn't even keep drugs out of prison. They were violent places that created better, more cultivated criminals, that people like me went into there wanting help just to end up getting really traumatized and saddled with $10,000 or $15,000 in debt, being prevented from getting a good paying job to take care of my family and my children afterwards. That drove me into that activism mindset. I hooked up with a really good local addiction recovery center, and they were like, "Hey, John, just come listen to what we're working on." And they were working on this thing called the Second Chance Drug Diversion Program, which was a program that was centric on keeping nonviolent drug offenders like myself out of prison in the first place, giving them the help that they needed, treating the reality that addiction's not a crime, that people need help throughout the process. And I found myself after not too long sitting down with county commissioners and state representatives and senators and police chiefs and advocating for the Second Chance program. So I saw how my hardships, everything that I went through, that I was always really embarrassed about, that I thought was my biggest weakness, actually ended turning up into one of my greatest strengths. And that's kind of what drove me right into activism. I saw how my lived experience that I went through could actually make an impact in people's lives to prevent them from going through the same thing that I did. So it's kind of that mindset of planting a tree, planting the seeds to a tree that you'll never actually sit in the shade from. And so I learned that kind of activism from good people around me, and I want to continue to pass that down.
Well, I appreciate you sharing those details. I feel like that makes you way different than anybody I've ever spoken to. When it comes to addiction, I've had a lot of family members struggle with it, and it's gotten to a point where I just decided to just be sober, because I just don't want to have to get to that point, because I see, unless you have that awareness, like when you were serving your time and you were aware that it was making better criminals and having people cultivate these relationships, and all of a sudden then they go out and nothing really changes, it just makes them even better. And I have always seen that, and I've always said that. And I think when it comes to our correctional facilities, I don't even know the purpose of them at this point. I've seen people go in and out of the system more times than not. I don't know anybody who's come out and had that kind of motivation that you found.
There is no correction in our correctional facilities. Our criminal justice system is broken from the top to the bottom and broken 10 ways in between. We operate under a lot of for-profit private prisons here in America. That's the reality. Is people, if you go all the way back and you look at what prisons were built for violent people. They were built to actually correct people, to give them the tools, the mindset that they needed to reintegrate them back into society. When the war on drugs was manufactured and really kicked into full gear under Nixon and Reagan and such, there was a huge alignment with the private prison industrial complex. A lot of people don't realize that there's private prisons that operate and they use human beings as stock portfolios. based on the number of beds that they fill. That's how much they can sell it off to their board of investors. There's an immense amount of profit. There's legalized slave labor in prisons, right? Colorado's a big perpetuator of that. Our license plates are made in the prison industry. A lot of the furniture that goes to institutions, hospitals, schools throughout the country is built in prison itself. So like I have just seen everything fail time and time again. And then I've researched other countries. Like I've looked at Norway, I've looked at some of these Scandinavian countries where they don't even have prison guards, right? They get to swim every day. They get to exercise. They get to learn skills. They trust them and they reintegrate them back into society. So like America, we're not the global leader for a lot of things, but the one thing that we do lead in is the global incarceration rate. And so I think there's a huge correlation with how we treat human beings here in our criminal justice system, how we wage wars of imperialism and occupation overseas, and that kind of violence has just overtaken our entire culture. So I am very passionate about reforming our criminal justice system, and I'm sorry that you've had experience with it through your family members, because it's really, really tough to watch people that you love and care about go through those perpetual struggles. I learned that there's a lot of really intelligent people in prison, right? And it's like kind of that movie mindset, like, yeah, I'm either going to be in prison or I'm going to be a millionaire. Like there's a lot of people in there that are like that, where their skill set is underutilized, where they struggle with mental health problems, where they were sexually abused when they were kids, that they developed a substance abuse issue during their teens. Like we need to do better as a country to offer correction to people, and our jails aren't doing it.
And I've made that point before that we really, it's like people don't, I think everything really dwindles down to the mental health crisis. It's not only caused people to not care about one another, but it caused people to not care about themselves. It turns into addiction. It turns into furthering abuse. And I think there's this little underlining like fear to be deemed as weak. And it's scary because you see people, and I've had so many family members that I'm just like, and ever since I was little, I've talked to them and I've been able to connect with them. And I think that's kind of what's gotten me where I am, because I always want to listen to them. I think everyone has an experience. Everyone has a reason to how they act and what they do. And if you're not willing to like share that and kind of get to the bottom of it, then there's not really much to fix, right? You don't really know what's happening. And when it comes to mental health issues, I cannot stress enough that I think mental health issues cause so many issues in this country. We're the leading like country for incarceration, but we also for mass shootings and all these other things. And it's like there's nothing positive that we lead in, really. And I just think that people are so afraid to talk about it. People are afraid to talk about mental health issues, and they're scared that they're going to be like judged or whatever, but more people oftentimes than not deal with them. And I think that I've had like family members that also, and like people in my life that just deny that mental illness even exists. Like it's not a thing. I don't know what you're talking about. Like it's fine. Everything's fine. You're just being dramatic. And it's like things like that dismissiveness not only makes people like just keep to what they're doing, but also makes them believe that they can't change or actually cause any difference. So I just really appreciate that. I didn't expect to have that kind of conversation, but I really, I think mental illness is so we talk about it, but I don't think we talk about it to the extent like the people who have learned how to deal with it and live with it and treat it are so quick to talk about it. But then there's these like lost part of our population that just don't even want to like admit that this caused that and that's how they're there. And it just freaks me out. It's just the same thing. It's like people don't care enough, whether it's politics, whether it's about themselves, mental health issues, healthcare. I just am so scared that we've been so disappointed so many times that we really don't think there's anything left out there for us. So, anyways, that was just my rant about that.
That was a good one. There's kind of this mindset, like American exceptionalism, right? Pull yourself up by the bootstraps, like you said. The stigma behind asking for help, or admitting that you're helped, that doesn't indicate weakness, right? And I think that that's how we need to reprogram ourselves. When we look at how we approach our criminal justice program in America, so much of what we do with everything isn't that we don't have the money to do it. Whether you take healthcare, criminal justice reform, anything, it's that we have an empathy problem. We have an empathy problem for how we treat our neighbors, how we treat people with mental health ailments, how we treat people that are struggling. Like, I grew up in a small community in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I remember, it's a lot different than it is now today, but I went to a Presbyterian church, and I used to remember how our pastor would talk about people, how he would talk about how you would take care of people that were sick, how you would take care of your neighbors when they were down and out. My dad was a carpenter, so if somebody in the community, if they lost their home, guess what the church did? They banded together and they would help build that person a new home. Like, that level of community has been lost throughout the generations in America. In these little towns that I grew up in Pennsylvania, everybody knew everybody. Everybody watched out for everybody. You could never break down on the side of the road and not have 3 or 4 people show up and change your tires and take care of you and take you home and call your parents. Or, if I was walking home at nighttime, people would give me rides. Like, that is what I feel like we're missing so much. I look even in the neighborhood that I live in, and I see my neighbors that live next to me for 5+ years that haven't even ever waved or said hi. Like, we're so introverted today that we've lost that level of community and connection that really binds us all together. And I think that's the cultural puzzle piece that America's really missing. And once we can resuscitate that level of community involvement, that interest to take care of your neighbors, I think it all kind of overlaps with each other.
The whole neighbor thing, I experienced that, and it wasn't until my parents had been divorced and my mom got remarried, and my stepdad's like a social butterfly. So all of a sudden, I knew the army guy that was across the street from me all the 15 years of my life, and I'm like, oh, that's his name, and he's saying hi now. That's kind of, okay, hey, that's cool. So that was weird, but I really do think that that's fueled by not trusting people. When I was younger, even right now, I'm like terrified of people. Like, they scare me. I don't ever want to get into a position that I'm like, that someone can be like, well, it's because you put yourself there, or because, if you weren't to do that, then it wouldn't have happened to you. And it's like, okay, so I've had this like paranoia all my life that I need to watch how I move, because I never want something to happen to me where people can say that was my fault for trusting them or my fault for doing that. So the mistrust, not only within the community, but that's what makes it so easy for people like Donald Trump to demonize other people, because you're already thinking in the back of your mind, like, what if these people turn on me? What if they're actually not who they say they are? And you're kind of just thinking about it like that. So I personally struggled with that a lot, like just trusting people. And I feel like that's a big theme around here, whether you're talking about relationships, whether you're talking about friendships, like or the government, there's no trust anymore. So I'm not sure how to address that.
That's a really good point. I never really approached it from that mindset that it really is a trust issue. I think that some of it has to do with the phones that we have. The technology that's been created, it keeps you connected to people that are far away from you, but at the same time, it pulls you away from the people that are close to you. My son's 14 years old. He knows how to text people. He will not call people, right? Like, we just grew up and being a 37-year-old millennial, I feel like we're one of the last people that grew up at like when things were still analog, right? Where we had just rotary dial phones and stuff in the 90s. And, you rode your bike to your friend's house and rang their doorbell. And if they weren't home, that was it. Like, we saw the emergence of technology. We saw how the internet fundamentally transformed everything. So I do equate a lot of what we're going through today to technological innovations, to just the way that everything pushed forward. But I think that the trust aspect is huge, and I think it is uniquely an American thing. I didn't used to think that until I became friends with a lot of people that live overseas, until I talked to a lot of my family members that live over in Italy, until I met people that have recently gone to live in Spain and Portugal. All of those countries have an immense accountability for community. They have an immense amount of trust. And that's not to say that there's not bad people, because there is bad people. But when you're constant, and I'm not undermining your feelings at all, because I totally think they're legitimate, but I think when you get trapped into that dichotomy of not trusting people, then you lose access to all the people that are really trustworthy in your life. right? And so you're in that constant state of survival. And that's really what living in America feels like today. We're in this perpetual state of survival. We don't trust our neighbors. We don't trust our government. Everything is so toxic, and something has to change because I'm so worried about what our future looks like, what my children's future looks like, what our grandchildren's future looks like, and even what our lives will continue to look like in another 5 or 10 years if we can't start to trust people again.
So you mentioned that your son doesn't like calling people. I love phone calls. I think people should only call me ever. I'm so bad at texting. I'm surprised I texted you back as fast as I did. I was like, oh, well, I just happened to have been on my phone. But when it comes to that, too, when you said how you grew up and you would ride your bike to your friend's house, I can really make this connection. While you were talking, it was in my head because I remember up until 5th grade, that's kind of when Facebook started to be a thing and everyone started to get social media accounts, and my mom didn't let me. So I was like, okay. I had an iPod at home. I completely threw myself into the YouTube world, and YouTube raised me. It was like a thing. And I never really thought about that, but all the social media, I think the social media getting introduced, all of a sudden my friends that lived down the street, just because they went to a different middle school, then we didn't talk because we weren't friends on Facebook because I didn't have a Facebook or an Instagram or any of those things. So I kind of, when you're talking about that, I'm like, you're totally right. I think 5th grade was the last time I went outside to play with somebody. And then all of a sudden I had YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. I didn't need friends. I could just see what other people who live in California who are living my ideal life are doing.
Exactly.
I don't need to communicate with the people around here. So that is crazy that you say that.
It really is different because I think back to when I was in 5th grade, the biggest thing that we had was dial-up internet and AOL Instant Messenger. And we used to put up our away messages like, hey, be right back. And when you went offline, you actually went offline. Like when you put your away message up, you left your house and you rode your bike and you hung out with your friends. There is no getting away from it today. You constantly have that connection, that distraction, that dopamine scrolling that so many of us do just to pass time. I don't think if people track their phone usage and they saw that they were spending 60 to 70 hours a week on their phone, and then you times that by how many weeks there are in a year, and we're all guilty of it at different levels, I self-regulate because I understand the danger that it poses. Take those 60 or 70 hours a week and imagine if you cut that down to 5 or 10. What would you do with all that free time? How would that fundamentally transform and change your life? It's those things that we don't think about anymore. We've become so numb to them. I mean, I walk down a lot of the trails and 5 out of every 10 people are having a conversation on their phone instead of enjoying nature and interacting with people. And I hate to sound like an old person in that sense, but it's like we have lost so much human connection just over the last decade. And I really feel it. I think that people my age, especially, we're very nostalgic for the 90s. And we're nostalgic for this time period and this place that we're never going to get back. But the longer and longer I think about it, I don't actually believe we're nostalgic for a time period. I think we're nostalgic for the last period of our lives that we can remember where there was more intimate human connection, where there was less technological distractions, where our politics seemed to be like a difference on tax policy. It wasn't like this question of morality, basically, today. Like some people say, oh, I don't want to lose friendships over politics. And we're so past that because it's not just about losing friendships over politics. It's about losing friendships over a sense of morality today. And so when I think back to so many people that are homesick for the 90s, I really think that has a lot to do with it. And I think technology has created a lot of challenges. I think social media has fed into the algorithms and the division that we all feel in our country so much. And I think that corporations have amplified that, because it's been an effective tool for their perpetual quest and thirst for more capitalism. So I think that we're really being weaponized in real time against each other.
I definitely agree. So I want to talk about the division, right? So it's very obvious there's a division between Republicans and Democrats, but unfortunately there's also a division within the Democratic Party and within the Republican Party. If you were to face, so where do you think you fall in the Democratic Party? Do you think you're more of a progressive, moderate? What are you thinking?
I'm a progressive troublemaker, right? I have organized for the last 10 years within the Democratic Party. I'm a precinct organizer. I'm an elected state central committee person from Weld County. I'm an elected state executive committee person from Weld County. I hold all those roles and duties. But my goal in that has been because I've seen everything from the inside out. I've seen the corruption. I've seen the things that need to change, and so I want to be a disruptor. So I am proudly progressive in all of my policies, whether it's Medicare for all, housing for all, ending foreign wars, actually getting the Washington, D.C. money pipeline out of both major political parties. I definitely consider myself progressive, and I also think that the discourse that we're seeing in the Democratic Party right now is healthy for our democracy, because the biggest thing that I've learned being a Democrat is we talk a lot about billionaires, but we're funded by billionaires. We talk a lot about dark money, yet we take dark money. We talk a lot about corruption, yet Democrats are enveloped with corruption. We talk a lot about the failures of the Republican leadership, yet we have a lot of failures in our internal leadership. We just quell it differently than they do. We do it behind closed doors, and it's time for all of that to come out. There needs to be a generational change of power. There needs to be, we need to stop suppressing people that want to be change makers in the Democratic Party. We have gotten away from being the party that advocates for working people, and we advocate for a donor class above the working people. So I think that the divisions, even though they can be unhealthy, they can also be simultaneously healthy at the same time.
So I've talked to a couple of people who identify themselves or describe themselves as progressives, and I've always been so scared to do so because I feel like it turns a lot of the older Democrats off of wanting to talk to you, of wanting to support you. And so I kind of just go wherever the conversation takes me, as long as I get to my ultimate topic or my opinions getting out there or what I want them to know is said, if that's going to get you to listen to me for now. So do you feel like there's other people who kind of feel like that? It's just safer to not be as progressive, not do the whole everything should be kind of free thing?
100%. And so I think back to Teddy Roosevelt, and I'm going to try to get it right, but he said something along the lines of a great democracy has got to be progressive, or it will cease to be both great and a democracy. And that's something that's always stuck with me. If you're not progressing us forward, then you're actually regressing us. You're not just keeping us where we are. The status quo is failing everyday Americans, right? It's why you're seeing this extreme poverty, a redistribution of wealth every day to the top 1%, AI stamping out what little bit of stability working people had, cuts to Medicare, cuts to Medicaid, insolvency to social safety nets like Social Security that have protected retirement generations, people like me that are in six-figure student debt going to school, kids like my children that are on that threshold of going to college that might never be able to attend. Everything is failing. So when I hear you in your argument, I've dealt with that a lot. There's a lot of hesitancy to embrace progressivism. So much of that is for an unfortunate reality. And that's that a lot of those older people, even in the Democratic Party, tend to lean conservative. They view the world through a lens that no longer exists. They had completely different upbringings from us, right? They didn't experience American fascism at the time. They grew up believing that America was a force of good in the world that stood up to fascism, not put them in the White House. They grew up where a guy could graduate high school and he could go get a job at the local factory and he could buy a 3-bedroom home with, minimal debt. He could have a car, take his family on vacation every year, send his kids through college, and live the American dream with relative ease. And I've talked to a lot of those folks throughout my lifetime, and I've learned their perspective. That reality does not exist for us anymore. So the generational divide that you're seeing is just because we have completely different upbringings. We have completely different recognitions of what it's like to be an American today. And so I think our generations have responsibility to take power, because we're the ones that are going to be witnessing all the fallouts of it. But we also have a responsibility not to negate and run away from that progressivism. It's our job to show and educate older and younger generations how progressive policies uplift people from poverty, how it pushes our country forward towards sustainability. Because right now, I don't know if our country's going to be around in another 5 to 10 years. Social Security is supposed to go insolvent in the next couple of years. They gutted all the federal Pell Grants so the kids can't fund their way into college anymore. Jobs are disappearing. Oracle yesterday laid off 30,000 people. They woke up to an email, 30,000 jobs gone. AI could stamp out 70% of the jobs that we've been sending people to college for, for the last 2 decades. They could disappear within the next 3 to 4 years. Like, we are at this precipice of a world that is a dangerous new frontier that we have no idea what it's going to look like. It's time to start taking care of people again. And it's time to build a movement and to get people that are too damn stuck in their old ways of conventional thinking to understand and recognize the urgency for the moment that we're in. Look at the snowpack in Colorado this year. Look at the global warming that's happening. Look at the weather instability. Look at how that's affecting people throughout the entire world this year. Like, we're at a dangerous time. So to think that we can just maybe go back to how it was, or, maybe just talk about slow incremental reforms, like, we don't have that luxury. And so I find myself in that conversation, and I probably used to curate my message more. And then I realized, like, no, this is our time, this is our moment, and we have a responsibility to educate people.
I feel like when I have those conversations, I almost feel like I'm gentle parenting. Like, no, don't do that, or no, don't think that, or, oh, how about this? Have you ever thought about it this way? How about try this? Or have you thought about this? And yeah, so it's hard to be very young in the Democratic Party because I'm always gotten along with older people, so it's okay. But I also have to constantly be like, I can't be too aggressive with them or they're not going to listen to me.
Yeah, they're not always receptive to the level of change. My advice navigating within the Democratic Party is just the unfortunate reality that, respectfully, a lot of those people that believe in democratic ideals and principles that are involved in the party, they're not going to be here much longer, right? The Democratic Party is either going to cease to exist and something else is going to rise from its ashes, or people like you and I are going to take over that party and steer its direction. We're definitely gentle parenting. People are naturally resistant to change. That's just part of human nature. So I always try to remember that when I'm working with them. But that mindset right there, that like level of status quo complacency, that's what led us to the moment that we're in now. We can't blame the Republicans for everything. Decades of neoliberal policies that came predominantly from Democrats that shipped our jobs overseas, that signed bad trade agreements, that continued the forever wars no matter who was in the White House. That's what drove that level of distrust towards the government. The status quo got us here. The previous generation that have kind of negated their duty to progress our country over the last couple decades, the hope and change that never materialized under Barack Obama, that was supported by a lot of those people in the Democratic Party. There's a lot of unfortunate, inconvenient truths that we're all dealing with and coping with right now. And they need to understand, like, that level of complacency led us here, and we have a job, we have a duty to get us out while we still can. The Democratic Party is being overtaken in real time by people like you and I. And it's a little difficult because these people, they've held it for so long. It's like the Democratic Party is like their baby. That's something they've cultivated and they feel proud about, and they should. And they still have a role. We're not like being ageist and saying, get out of our way and give us all the power. But we do want to balance the power, right? People under 40 are the largest. Gen Z and millennials are the largest voting bloc in America, yet we're the least represented in every level of government. And that's by design, because we have these people in their 70s, in their 80s that refuse to get out of the way and pass the torch to the next generation of people. So we just have to keep drilling that into them, as painful as those conversations are sometimes.
Definitely. And I hope we can see that change, and I think we will see it. I think it just takes time and patience and energy, and I think we have it for now. But thank you so much, John, for coming on. I think this was a great conversation. Awesome. I'm sorry to need to cut us off just because of time, but is there anything else you want to mention or say, or that you want people to know?
There's nothing too specific. Like I said, my future is uncharted right now. It's undecided. I just know that I can't abandon my passion, the work that I've done, the belief that I have that we can actually build a better country that works for everybody. So I would just encourage everybody to follow me on social media. Connect with me. I'm on Substack and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky and TikTok and everything in between. And I'm going to continue to build coalitions online in the streets with people throughout Colorado, throughout the country. because we don't have the luxury of sitting back while everything, feels dark around us. So just remember that when things do feel dark, because we're going through some bad times right now, you're not alone, and we're in this together.
Awesome. And your social media is at John Padora?
No, it should be at Padora for CO on everything. Padora for Colorado.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next episode.